Hi everybody, I'm Ross Finman. I'm from Niantic Labs. I'm going to be talking about treating Earth as an augmented reality game board. So one of the nice things about coming to these events, rather than going to like some of the computer vision mapping ones, is most people here have heard of Niantic. Most people refer to us as the Pokemon Go company. So a little bit of my background just to kind of get you all situated. So I was recently the co-founder and CEO of Escher Reality. We were founded in 2016. This was well before like augmented reality was cool, before Pokemon Go came out. This was when actually even before Oculus came out. So then we were working on doing 3D mapping on devices. We went through Y Combinator last summer. We were venture backed, and then through a crazy fall, if anyone here in the augmented reality space knows, the AR cloud kind of buzzword was created. We were one of the companies working on that, and then we were acquired by Niantic at the end of last year. So I lead up the 3D mapping efforts for augmented reality. So if you think about this in the gaming context, that's kind of building up the game board that a lot of the players can use off of it. So a little bit of background on Niantic, because most people know about Pokemon Go first, Ingress second, and not much else after that. So it was founded in 2010, actually, the former Google Maps team. So they built like Google Earth, Street View, the entire geo team. So then they spun out like, how can you use these style of maps to kind of view the world differently and have experiences with them? Google then spun them out with the reorganization for Alphabet. I think that they regretted that shortly after, 2016. And some of the games that have been developed, so then there's Ingress, Pokemon Go. I've been told by the marketing people, all that I can say officially is Harry Potter has been announced. Also, one of the things that people don't know is actually Field Trip, which wasn't fully a game, but an experience that people could kind of explore the world around them and kind of learn about, say, the Wikipedia articles about what are the different places and different things to kind of explore and expand the world. So it's kind of the stepping stone of first get information about the world, then have an experience in the world, then have a worldwide experience in the world, and continuing that on with Harry Potter. Now, that's kind of sets the stage for the background. Now, I want to talk more about, and world's largest AR user base right now. So we have a very large slice of a small pie, and then we're hoping that the general pie grows much bigger over time. But the goal of this talk is I want to talk about interactive augmented reality. So how can you use the Earth as a game board in a sense? How can you begin to interact with it? And then how to think about doing like planet scale augmented reality. So what changes when you're thinking about games that are kind of in the real world where people are running around and you have tens of millions, hundreds of millions in our case, of people exploring in the world and kind of doing things. So what are kind of frameworks in which to think about that? Because augmented reality is in the very, very early days of it. So think about it's like where mobile was in 2007. It was kind of the first releases of like simple games, and it took a while for people to begin to figure out what are the mechanics. So if you get into this, one of the big questions that I always like to start with is what is actually new about augmented reality from a gaming perspective? So what are the tools in which you can use? So I've found two. First is that the position of the device matters. So like you can view things in different angles. If you have a headset on, you can walk around, you can dodge things. So that's actually where a lot of development in augmented reality is today. It's kind of using the device positioning, kind of shooting at stuff, moving around. It's on the simpler side, but it's a good step forward. And then what I get really excited about and where I view the future of gaming and augmented reality is the real world becomes content. So how can you have games that begin to interact with, explore, and take advantage of the real world? So for an example, like using the device position, like there's this demo that came out I think last June or July from ARKit after Apple's announcement. So here you can actually use the phone as a paintbrush in the real world. For my own company, we developed a kind of quick concept of like Escher Sketch for Escher Reality, and then this kind of blew up, and I think is a really nice application of how you can use kind of the position of the device to create an experience. So then people would draw things in the world and then explore and like take videos of them. So But what I want to focus on is, for this talk, the real world becoming content. So I view a lot of the stuff that's being explored right now as the position of the device, but then there's so much more potential in what people can do for the real world. So for this, I kind of break it down into 4 levels of interactivity. So if you think about, like, the first level is overlaying. So it's kind of digital content is displayed over the camera in view. So this is actually what the first version of Pokemon Go was, if everyone knew it. It was kind of the most basic version of augmented reality, and like it doesn't quite live in the real world, but you can do kind of interesting, cool things with it. So the number of pictures and videos that went around with kind of staging all of this after Pokemon Go released is, I can't share with you some of them. No one should see those. But it begins to get kind of digital content, and it fulfills the fantasy for people. And that's really what kind of a lot of gaming is what is the imagination? What is kind of the hook that brings them in? But as we get into more like longer term sustainable interactions, you can begin to think about kind of anchoring in the real world, which is where the current state of technology is today. Digital content is really connected to the real world. You can walk around it, you can explore it. This is like you draw things, you can leave it there. There's a lot of really wonderful new technology that's being developed in the AR space in terms of having this be persistent, having it be seen by multiple people, kind of having it really live in there rather than just for one individual session. So that's kind of on the spectrum at the moment. So one of the things that I start to get really excited about is as you begin to get into interacting. So I'm going to take a little bit of a moment here is kind of how do you bring the physical world into the digital content, and how do you begin to have them mesh seamlessly? So this is, I view, a really exciting concept. So this was a demo we did for my company before we joined Niantic, and can't share any. I can have a lot of freedom to share the stuff that I've shown before for my company. There's exciting new stuff that will kind of wrap up nicer for Niantic. But in this case, it was using colors as a resource for game development. So then you could actually mine the colors out of the chairs, and actually over time you could set a shader over it, and then it would take the color out and turn it slightly more gray over time. Then you'd have to move your mine around, and then the color would come back. So then if you think about this is taking in the kind of the colors of the real world, and then it changes the game strategy and the dynamic based off of the location. That's a very simple thing to say, but very complex in terms of the game mechanics, because okay, if you want more gold, you can put up more post-it notes, and then you can imagine people like rearranging their living rooms, or like, okay, I need to have like a pink resource, and they paint all their colors pink, and they're like, oh my god, I need more blue, and then they paint one wall blue and one wall pink. You can imagine the kind of really excited people that we run into a lot of really excited people at Niantic and Ingress. They're very enthusiastic people. But then here you can imagine, how do you bring in like the objects of the real world? So then this is kind of an interesting concept, because if you think about gaming before, it was really what can people develop on their own, or sorry, what can developers develop on their own? And then the longer term experiences are not just, okay, what is the content that has been created, but what are the people that you're playing with? So say that you're playing Halo, like the first time that you play the game, you go through and it's like, okay, you spend like tens of hours kind of going through it. You can play that maybe 4 times and discover other nicks and crannies. But then if you go into like multiplayer systems, where it's kind of connecting people all across the globe, then it changes from what is the content of the game to what is the strategy associated with other players. Now for augmented reality, you can also include other players with a lot of the new technology that's being developed, but you can also kind of think about the real world as content. So then if you can bring in the colors, the objects, the environment as a whole into the game, which a lot of this technology and the infrastructure is being developed by us, other companies. Google made some wonderful announcements then you can actually have kind of two sources, both other people and the environment that you're in. So if you think about like tower defense in your living room, and then you need to like rearrange the cushions, and then you need to put up digital turrets and everything, like all this stuff can really affect how people play in the games. So I think this is a very important step, and this is actually like colors as a resource. This is available like today. Everyone can use it. There hasn't been that much development, but it's one of the things that I'm really excited about. And then I view like where this is going longer term in the future is kind of affecting. So then how can digital content affect the real world? So this actually came out of a demo that we were doing, goodness, about 2 years ago now, where we had like this digital cat that was like running around in the real world. And then people say, oh, can the cat move the cup? And then the cup was real and the cat was digital. And it was like, no, it's you can't change or move things in the real world. It's just a camera. But it kind of fulfilled the fantasy enough that people kind of expected it. And then when you like mention that, no, it's the cup is real, the cat's not, then be like, oh, okay. So it's actually a sign of like people believing the experience. But afterwards, we were like, oh, how could you actually move the cup? And then because you have control of the camera feed, you can do kind of interesting things with it. So I actually view in the longer term, you can actually like use a lot of very complicated systems to kind of bring in the content of the real world and begin to like make slight modifications to it, begin to change it. So then you can like actually end up with a matrix style thing where you can begin changing the real world. And to show that this is possible with kind of older technology and other things, that there's still a lot of development here, not saying that any of this is available right now, but just kind of how it's going, is this is actually from SIGGRAPH in 2014. Wonderful paper. I forget who the authors are to give them full credit, but it kind of offers a telekinesis mode where if you have a model of the origami, you can actually, from a single image, kind of fill in the back and then have things fly around. So imagine that if you could do that with like your cup can become something and then walk around on the table and then like quickly move back, and you have these little experiences. So like this is still in the kind of future technology, but this is at least view like the end of the spectrum of what is capable for interaction. And then the cool thing about all this, at least from our standpoint, and what I hope many other people get to, is doing this at what we call a gigantic scale. So how can you do this for kind of cities, countries, continents, and like the entire globe? So then what changes when you can have, say, some gamers playing in one place and another place and other gamers playing in another, and how can you begin to connect them together because you have knowledge about these different environments? So again, sadly the example that comes to mind is a Harry Potter one. I've been told I can just say that's announced, but there's kind of cool things that you could imagine connecting different parts of the world and relating different objects together and kind of bringing this at a very, very large scale, so then people can feel connected not just in the same location, but across locations, and then you can have interactions at that level. So summarize on this, and love to take questions afterwards. I believe that the new game board is not digital, it's not in our imaginations, it is the real world, and then we can add on new layers on top of it. So we're just at the very, very beginning of augmented reality. It's kind of one of these really exciting creative opportunities in the sense that a lot of these questions and how it will develop are just unknown. So we heard about like the kind of amazing growth about mobile, like for augmented reality, this is just like we're scratching the surface of what it can be, because a lot of the tools and even the creative, like what do you do with it, are still being explored at the moment. And actually there's a lot of really wonderful like indie developers, small studios, larger studios like us that are really taking hard looks at how to define the space and look into it. There's new differentiated AR mechanics. So in the mobile space, even though mobile AR isn't mobile, you can have things that very much stand out just because of the nature of the game. It's a new medium. It's not saying to create like Candy Crush, as addictive as a game as it is, but like that in AR doesn't make sense. But what are the new mechanics that you can begin to do in AR? There's new technical ones, the position of the phone and the real world becoming content, but like what are the creative mechanics that people can develop off of that? And then lastly, like I believe that games can and should interact in the real world. So we found with Pokemon Go and even an Ingress and to a lesser extent Field Trip before, like when you get people out there and like exploring in the real world, I actually met my girlfriend based off of playing, not fully playing, but talking about Pokemon Go and everything else. So. But no, it's this really wonderful experience that has kind of natural viral effects. If you kind of, people are rushing off the bus, and then you kind of, there's wonderful videos of people in like Tokyo, like a mob of them taking over the streets, which is terribly unsafe, and we felt terrible about that. But like, there's like 1,000 people running through the streets, like because rare Pokemon was out there, and like there's a lot of wonderful social interactions that come out of it. So there's kind of these new areas that not even we knew when we were getting into this, that I think have so much more opportunity. And with that, I'd like to thank you all and open this up for questions.
Thanks, Ross. That was great. I think this whole area, like you said, this idea of how much we've yet to find out about what's possible is kind of key to me.
Oh yeah.
And you know what I find really fascinating, like you say, the world is at a global level is now our playing field, and the amount of how we collect data for that, how we share information, how we can leverage existing pieces. Mm-hmm. You know, how much of a challenge? I mean, obviously you guys have done huge amounts of work on this, but for people who are maybe coming in as an indie, how do you think the indie community is going to be able to take advantage of that kind of work that you guys or other companies are doing to make it possible to make the world a playful space?
So I think that there's two things. One is in terms of I'm encouraging Niantic to share more externally, like the lessons learned associated with like, okay, how do you deal with like hundreds of millions of people and then kind of games on that level, because there are a lot of the questions out there. And then so I think it's just getting more of a community around the space, so then having people talking and exchanging ideas, because there are these like little niche groups I found all over the world that are exploring different augmented reality aspects, and then just connecting them and saying, hey, you two should talk, then it ends up getting a good connection in there. And I just view the AR space as so early at the moment that there hasn't really been this kind of condensing of ideas. We're trying to start to nurture that at the moment, but from a technological standpoint, and there's kind of a lot of data associated with it, like for us, based off of lessons learned from Pokemon Go and everything else, like we're kind of opening up our own like kind of real world platform associated with this, so then people can say like, okay, well, this worked for all the Niantic games, and then can this work for other studios, and then offering kind of that as an open service independent of any of the other systems on top of it.
Yeah, and I think that's what I find fascinating. Again, I think you covered this, is this whole idea that there's actually a whole bunch of layers going on here. There's the augmented reality part, which is fantastic. There's the location part. There's the big data part. There's the social part, all of which are kind of different ways of looking at experience. In fact, my favorite all-time movement location type experience was actually a game done in like 2006, I think it was. It was called Triangular.
Oh, yeah.
I think I may have mentioned it. Basically, the idea is you had 10 people, 5 people on each team, and they had to make a triangle. It was 150 meters on each edge, and when you managed to make that triangle, you could press a button and capture the enemies who were inside that triangle. I mean, this is completely insane, but it played like paintball. And I mean, no commercial model, but I think Nokia at the time was still a thing, and they bought it. But it's the fact that you can see Pokemon at one end and you can see Triangular at another end, and that's not just a spectrum. There's a whole array of potential new concepts, I think.
Oh yeah, totally. And even in like Ingress, one person flew from Europe to Hawaii to like complete a mission with the team and everything else, and like
that's dedication to duty.
Totally.
I mean, I've got a taxi driver who takes me to all the airports every time I fly, and I fly a lot, and he's a massive Pokemon fan, and he and his nephew spend every weekend getting together with clustered groups using some of these forums, and they just go and do missions together, and so it's incredible, the social experience. Anyway, I'm hogging because I like talking about this stuff. Anyone got any questions? Come on, I can't be the only one who is fascinated. Go for it, yeah.
Oh, I have to do this. Okay. For my question, I was like asking if augmented reality became a norm in like marketing. So if like Coca-Cola would get, you would hold your phone over Coca-Cola, something would happen, and then you would have a chance to win or something. Would that drown out like the wonders of having augmented reality, or would like?
Personally, I don't think so. So there's kind of been different marketing campaigns throughout the years, like some with marker-based systems like that. So in terms of does like having a digital avatar kind of like run around in different commercials in a sense, like kind of ruin the Snapchat experience or Bitmojis in a sense? I don't think so. So I think as long as you have a mechanic associated with it that is more in the gaming space, then you can fairly differentiate them.
Cool. And on that note, Ross, thank you very much.
Thank you.